This is not a dream.
I'd like to share a story with you today. It's called A Christian Experience, a Paradox. Undefined. The story, as told, is not to hurt or blame others. Because sexual abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse does happen. And it happens to those who are Christians. I want to say today, those who have suffered from prolonged trauma in the church. Some of those people have died, and they've never shared their story. This story is long overdue. This is a personal story. It's never been told before. But the time is now. The publisher wanted the manuscript from 2009. However, the author couldn't finish the story. She couldn't get it on paper. Because each memory that she had, each thought, triggered too many strong emotions. Many individuals have hurt her with angry, rude comments, saying she's crazy, that she's a liar, and she doesn't remember. But the truth is, it's in the details, and the details don't lie. You might ask, what's the purpose of sharing a story like this? Well, the truth is, domestic violence, sexual abuse, and physical abuse, emotional abuse, narcissistic control, and other types of abuse are real in the church. You might ask, why did you wait so long to tell the story? Well, the answer is simple. It was the fear of the response. However, the silence of the matter needs to be broken. Who is she? She's a believer and a Christian. She's gone to Catholic Mass, Baptist churches, Pentecostal churches, Wesleyan churches, non-denominational churches, Mormon meetings, Jehovah's Witness groups, and many other churches trying to fit in to receive God's blessings. You might say that's a lot of churches. But I'll tell you why soon enough. She read her Bible every day, and she hid the fact that she stayed awake most nights as a child and a teenager reading her Bible to find the truth. This started at a very young age. She was very intelligent, but very withdrawn. However, when she began to have problems, she tried to poison herself and take her own life. She tried to drown herself. She would cry herself to sleep. She talked to herself. She chewed her nails till they bled. Later on, she started cutting herself. She spent a lot of time alone. She was very vulnerable and very alone. This full story has never been told before. But she'd like to tell you today that the sanctity of her womanhood was never protected as a child. Not by her parents, not by the church, not by anyone who said they cared. Because of her story and being angry about her upbringing, she's been told to stop holding grudges and let it go. Give it to God and forget about it. But I'd like to tell you today that God has a different and amazing plan, and here's why. She used drugs to numb the pain and the trauma. She was always withdrawn and silent. She was a good kid. But starting at age 4, she began to be traumatized by abuse and witnessing multiple family members engaging in ungodly sexual activity. Eventually, this activity involves her. As she grew up, she witnessed physical abuse of her mother and her siblings. You might want to ask, what does this have to do with the church? I'll get to that. Soon after this physical abuse she witnessed of her mother and siblings, she was raped by a boy at the local park. He was 16. She was 4. That same year, close to being 5 years old, her uncle starts grooming her, groping her, and forcing sexual activity on her, and eventually threatening her, telling her she better remain silent. These were her first years in the church. The first years of her life were haunted by these events. Church-going individuals had taken her innocence and had never apologized. To this day, these were members of the church. At 6, she knows the alcohol and the rages, abuse, and fighting in her home need to stop. A volunteer to go to VBS, which is Vacation Bible School, she begs the youth pastor to come to her home and tell her dad about Jesus. The youth pastor follows her instructions, and after several hours, her dad gives his life to Christ, leaving his 32-ounce Budweiser beer on the coffee table for 3 days. But he decides that he should give his life to Jesus, and he did. And shortly thereafter, he decides to become a pastor, a man of God, a preacher. So I became a PK, a pastor's kid. You might wonder why a parent becoming a Christian would not make a positive impact on a child. Well, it's because the violence didn't stop. The abuse didn't stop. She started getting molested more and more, and her life was upside down. At age 7, God steps in and gives her special gifts at a cost, a huge cost. At 7, she was hit by a motor vehicle on her birthday and suffered a severe concussion for 6 weeks, including concussive syndrome for months, amnesia, withdrawn behavior, and many other things. But God's gifts become a part of her life. She starts astral projecting and seeing others' actions and knowing if they are right with God. She obtains a photographic memory which only adds insult to injury of the many years of abuse and witnessing so many actions that a child should never witness, things that she should never see. She remembers smells, people's clothes, places and events, visual memories, haunting visual memories, and eventually having multiple encounters with beings from other planets, otherworldly beings, otherworldly encounters, but she's never really scared of those. She was more scared of the abusers and the people who were always fake and hurtful. At 8 years old, at the Baptist church she was going to at the time, the pastor had done a salvation call. She raised her hand, the pastor came to her side, and it's a day she'll never forget. She says she wants to get saved, but the pastor argues with her and says she's too young to be saved, she doesn't know what she's talking about, but he relents. He finally gives in. But she's already shut down. She's already been told no. And he says, "Are you ready?" And he's all sweaty and praying and praying and praying and praying. But something is wrong. And he says, "Okay, you're saved." And then she begs him for baptism. And still, half unwillingly, half willingly, he helps her. Later that year, she was stung by a swarm of hundreds of bumblebees, causing co-infections and other drastic symptoms. She was 8 years old when she got saved, 8 years old when she got stung by hundreds of bees. Then at 9, she started to witness debauchery. That means sex with animals. Weird animal fetishes and weird sexual things happening with animals. And sometimes she witnessed animals being poached, and sometimes the animals weren't dead. But they were thrown in the back of the vehicle where she did most of her traveling. At this age, she started drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes. At 10, her stepdad starts grooming her sexually, always touching her inappropriately until she starts acting out. Mind you, these are Christian individuals. These are people that believe in God. They believed in Jesus. They knew who he was. They knew what they were doing. Eventually, her dad makes a decision to go to seminary and become a pastor. This is when she's 10. The day that she shows up to their new house so he can go to pastoral school, or theological seminary as they call it, she witnesses 2 grown men molesting small children, girls ages 7 and 8. She'll never forget. She knows their names. By then, she starts running away, only to discover that no one notices or cares, that she's been gone for hours. She runs away at night for freedom and to have peace, but she realizes that she's utterly alone. At age 11, she contracts Lyme disease. Lyme disease is being bitten by ticks that carry Lyme disease, Babiosis microti, which then cause co-infections and other drastic symptoms, fevers, and out-of-body experiences. The doctors were never called. Nobody ever asked if she was okay. The same year, because when she contracted the Lyme disease, she stopped talking. from having shock and co-infections and being very, very sick. So she acts out. So she gets to go to jail. The sheriff asked her, after 4 hours of her sitting in the solitary confinement, the holding cell, at age 11, he says, I don't know how to help you. If you don't talk to me, I can't help you. She never did talk. He just had to take her home. She was 11. He couldn't incarcerate an 11-year-old. She was just really sick. Anyway, she has a stepmom. During this time, her stepmom was also very violent and physically abusive with her. She was a beautician by trade, and every week, every 2 weeks, she would have a new haircut. She would punish this small girl, hit her in the head, cut her hair, twist her ears, pinch her shoulders, pinch her neck, whisper in her ear, things that were just not loving, not kind. At one point, she beat her so badly that she missed 6 weeks of school. She had black and blue handprint bruises all the way down from her neck to the back of her legs. The excuse to the school was chickenpox. Shifted from at least 12 homes by age 11, she was constantly being touched, groomed, and raped, sometimes beaten, punished with a belt, told that she was out of control and that she was a bad child. She was shifted from home to home, from her mom's house to her dad's house, her siblings' home, and to many other people's homes. She attends church at least 3 times a week, unattended by adults or just left by her parents alone with strangers, church camps and otherwise. But these were all Christian individuals. From ages 9 to 13, she could buy her mom cigarettes, lottery tickets, and her alcohol with a written note. Her mom was very Catholic. They attended Mass frequently. However, her 12th birthday, her mom has the neighbor, who is 30, come over to the house and take this 12-year-old girl on a date. He takes her out on 4th of July and rapes her at the local golf course in midday, in the public. There was a check-in at the gate, and the woman had to check us in. This man, this 30-year-old man, took her to the river and rapes her, and eventually rapes her again. When this 12-year-old girl comes home, she tells her mom, and her mom tells her she's a liar. Shifted that year to her sibling's house, her older sibling's house, who's an adult at this time. She ends up having toxic shock syndrome and 106-degree fever. And eventually, she abuses the neighbor kid because she's in shock. She's sick. She's being forced to babysit children and being left unattended. The 106-degree fever went on for 3 days, and the doctor was never called. She spent many days in the nurse's office in elementary school and middle school because of co-infections, fever, and shock. The schools were always told she was a problem child. All the other kids laughed at her when the stages of Lyme disease became evident on her skin. They would mock her, and they would never choose her for a friend. By age 13, she was having full-blown grand mal seizures. Until 14 years old, she was never allowed to go anywhere or have friends. She was directed to sit at the kitchen table and read her Bible when the adults watched television and ate dinner. This was when her dad received his pastoral license and had his first parsonage, which the parsonage is the house attached to the church. But she was very alone and isolated. There was no motherly love, no positive father's affection. She was being abused by her parents, her siblings, her uncle, her stepdad, her mother's friends. So much was wrong. There was no love, no compassion. But she clung to her Bible and God's promises and kept it hidden. She read her Bible every night under the covers in the dark. And she hid cigarettes in the heater vent just to keep her sanity. She finally started smoking. She finally started drinking. By age 12, she could outdrink any adult she came around to numb the pain. The adults didn't pay attention. They didn't even know that she could drink and smoke and keep it hidden. She attended 10 schools by age 14. not including jail time and multiple different homes, including an old haunted orphanage. The orphanage had bars on the windows, and it was built in the 1800s, and it had many hidden rooms and creepy, malevolent spirits within. The building wasn't monitored at night. The staff would leave, and they would lock the children in, and they would go home and come back in the morning. Even the adults were too afraid to stay there. But the children, the young children, the girls and the boys, were all locked in with the bars on the windows and no adults. Most of the time, the girls would huddle in the corner, and you could hear the boys on the other side of the dormitories shuffling around, trying to stay sane. But most of the time, all of the individuals, all of the kids could hear children crying and screaming because we were all horrified. She tried and tried, but couldn't do much more. At 14, she didn't finish school. She finally dropped out in the first quarter of 10th grade. However, she was a good student. She went to church. She went to church camp. She was an honor student. She spoke several different languages. She was in choir and had many future dreams. She wanted to go into the Marines and become a police officer. She even talked to the recruiters, and they were all for it. They thought it was a great idea. But when her dad found out, he said no. He said it was a waste of my time. But many times she witnessed physical violence. She was raped and molested. She heard stories of her siblings being beaten and punished violently. Sometimes they were beaten just for having an accident, or doing self-care, or taking a shower, or wanting to hang out with friends or answer the phone. There was so much abuse. By age 15, she was placed in foster care for running away. However, the abuse did not stop. In the foster system, she witnessed all kinds of backward behavior. She became more isolated and eventually was raped by the 30-year-old farmhand. She was placed in a foster home that was a farm, isolated from society. But she decides that if she can't say anything or trust anyone, she should run away for good. She knows she should protect herself somehow. So one day, the same day that the 30-year-old farmhand rapes her, he speaks plainly and says that he's going to rape her foster sister. But instead of that happening, they decide to run away. So she does. But eventually, all she witnesses is full-blown horror. After leaving high school and running away from foster care, her foster sister's boyfriend commits suicide. Her foster sister gives her life to intravenous drugs and methamphetamines. And her mom influences her to become a prostitute. And her brother becomes a car thief. Running away just to get away from abuse in the church and in society. But at 15, members of the church offer her drugs, and she has an out-of-body experience. Everyone laughs at her, and nobody calls for medical attention. They had given her laced marijuana infused with cocaine. It was just too strong for her body. She survives, though, and she still knows that God is guiding her, but she feels so lost, alone, and afraid. Tired of the abuse, once again, she decides to run away, and she becomes homeless and hitchhikes across the country, sleeping in people's backyards and taking rides from complete strangers. Homeless and afraid of the consequences of going back to any of these horrible living situations, she lies about her age. However, everywhere she stays, or was invited, always had some type of forced exchange for sex for a place to stay. But at 16 years old, she gets shot in the back, 1.5 inches from her spine, which happens during an altercation over a pair of jeans, which wasn't her fault. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her parents were never called. She never went back to foster care. She was a ghost at this point. At one point, she witnesses a murder. And the post-traumatic stress that she was suffering, she couldn't tell the authorities because she had lied about her age. So she blocked it out for many, many years, and eventually calls the authorities and tells them everything. But she's unsure if the ordeal was ever solved. That same summer, she's kidnapped at gunpoint by an older man who insists she listen to Bob Dylan as loud as possible. By age 16, she's been raped and molested at least 49 times. She starts a life of substance abuse, self-harm that includes huffing glue, paint, rubber cement, self-harm such as cutting, trying to drown herself, poison herself, all because individuals were allowed to harm her sexually and abuse her, which eventually leads to her being placed in a women's prison as a minor. But eventually she's released, gets a boyfriend, and becomes pregnant with her first child. And the confusion of church is still very prevalent. At 17, she has her first child, and at 18, she has her second child. But her fear of church and churchgoers at this point is beyond manageable. However, she attends Pentecostal churches, Baptist churches, Christian churches, and getting baptized in each one of those, but was never fully able to become invested because no one was really paying attention. Nobody ever asked what was going on with her. Having a rough upbringing and lack of family support, and never sharing her story, she becomes a member of another church. Mind you, she has 2 children at this time. And the church decides that she should place her children in a private school 1,500 miles away, making it clear they need to stay there till they're 18 years old. Eventually, the private Christian school gets shut down by the authorities for sexual abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse, which include her children. All the while, the church groups and church people were alienating her and restricting her from everything, including her children. But she fought back. She still hadn't finished high school, so she finally obtained her GED at 21, only to be approached by a family member shortly after to become a concubine in the faith. But she gets away. She takes her children, and she isolates herself because of fear of the relationships she's encountered in the church, which all ended up badly because of abuse, neglect, sexual deviation, and psychological manipulation. During the time she was in any congregation, she wore a dress, never pants. She had serious body shaming issues, but never once thought a woman should wear pants. She was just brainwashed. She got baptized in several churches, and being baptized meant to wash away your sins. There was never an outpouring of the Holy Spirit. However, God was still present in her life, even though she was baptized many times and associated with many different congregations and beliefs. While in the church, she became a victim of narcissistic abuse and coercive relationships that controlled her life. People in the church have cursed her. They've threatened her with black magic. They've stalked her. They've slandered her. They've tried to control her so that she could not get the truth out. Church-going people have threatened her so many times. They've just been jealous and hurtful. They've slandered her. They've continued lying about her upbringing, mocking her, and just being genuinely fake and not caring about her, not trying to help her through her sordid past. However, the truth is, it all began as a child in the church. She's received restricted and unknown harassing phone calls. She's been stalked. She's received death threats from church-going individuals. She's been poisoned and targeted by a hitman so she wouldn't come forward with this truth. Those included creating fake online profiles in Facebook and stalking her social media platforms, laughing at her inability to rise above her hardships. Legitimately, she's understood that others in the church have wanted her gifts. The lights came on. There have been some who have actually wanted her to be sacrificed. Some of those people have wanted her to never become anything. They didn't want her to get an education. They didn't want her to talk about her life. They wanted her just to forgive and forget. They wanted to steal her inheritance from God. They've mocked her during her times of adversity and hardship. They've told her she needs to be submissive and quiet, pious before God and his people. Churchgoers have slandered her for laziness, saying that she's only there for a handout and that her kids can't fit in and they can't get baptized. She's been called a whore, a hog, not smart, a nigger, a native, and out of control. She's had cigarettes put out on her face and alcohol poured down her throat, literally, without any respect for her life, while being held down and raped. The more she has listened to God about getting her story out, the more she's been met with opposition and hatred. She's had so many challenges thrown at her, but knowing that God would protect her, Even though she gave up many times and cried and isolated, hurting herself and her own self-worth, she's never had one friend or family member hear the whole story. They always run away, saying something hurtful, they don't act right, and they're not the same. They do it without apology because they're acting upon their own shame, and they reject her. The only individuals who have heard her story or seen what's happened are God and his angels. And yes, of course she's been to counseling and told to take prescription pills. But even there, she hasn't found one individual able to sit through the whole ordeal or listen to the story. It's just too much. Counselors have told her no one will listen. No one will do the right thing, ever. The bottom line is, let it go. No one wants to be responsible or accountable for this. But God says differently. God says her years of isolation are over. She's had to strengthen herself and learn to systematically stop the abuse by not responding to the evil. The evil responses, the no reaction, the no apology, the no prayer, the no help. Just not react to these people anymore. Jesus has just laid it on her heart to pray for them and let them work on their own salvation. And hopefully they'll turn things around before it's too late. Even though her difficult past in the church has hindered her opportunities in life, they've hindered her jobs, they've hindered her ability to fit in. Everything that's happened has hindered and blocked and stopped and stolen from her life. The idea of evil has never hindered her relationship with God. So you might ask, who is this girl? Is the story real? Did this really happen? Who is she? Well, of course, this is a real story. She is real. I'm talking about me. She's a real person with a real story. I'm keeping my identity safe because I deserve it. I deserve that respect. God told me to share the story and let it go. Don't forget, but let the story out. The point of the whole story is for individuals to see the perspective of a life in church from a little girl growing up in the church. No matter how bad it sounds, it's real. She's full grown, but she's tremendously tired of taking her power back silently. The moral of this story is, it's true. God wants us to have first-hand, realistic behavior. Every Christian is supposed to exercise the option to forgive. And I'm asking you to forgive. I'm asking you to exercise your option to forgive. Even when the past seems foreboding, unforgivable, relentless, and downright horrible. You can't thrive while dwelling on the past. You need to share your terrible past in order to obtain the blessings during and after these hardships. If anything has ever happened to you, in the church, outside of the church, quit being afraid. Become a voice to the voiceless. She's asking you, use your voice. Tell your story. Speak up. Tell others about the times the angels visited you when you were sick, hurt, alone, and afraid. She wants you to thrive on good memories, not haunted ones. She wants you to be free of the pain of the past and the misery that you've endured. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid that you're going to get punished by the church. If they reject you, that's on them. That's not on you. Don't be a victim. She didn't feel like a victim, but she just woke up. She woke up because the years of silence about her ordeal possibly has kept other people in the dark about crimes that are in the church. Unfortunately, there are other people staying silent. Other individuals might be suffering in silence, alone and afraid. Come on, listen up. In 2021, I finally called the police about all the sexual abuse as a minor, the grooming done by the adults in the church, the petting, the lies, and revealing all the individuals responsible for committing such horrible acts against a child. I contacted the heads of the churches involved, and no response has been given. None of the church-going individuals have been held accountable. The authorities cannot press charges because time has run out. The statute of limitations has passed. Just think about what I'm saying. Don't hide the truth. If you've been victimized, it's time to speak up. Protect your testimony. Intervene. It's time. Wipe the slate clean. Stop allowing wolves to devour the innocent souls who cannot protect themselves. Speak up. Again, wipe the slate clean. Stop allowing the wolves to devour the innocent souls who cannot protect themselves. Speak up. Don't stay silent any longer. Be aware. Think. Look around you. It's time to speak. It's time. This is a Christian story that triggered a response.